Hi, leaders. Welcome to Chapter 9, Embracing Diversity and Inclusion. Again, another one of my favorite chapters. I'm hoping at this point, this far into the semester, you are seeing how all of the things that we have studied up to this point are beginning to connect. Right? We really talked a lot about initially understanding how leadership is basically an inside job, right? That leadership requires that we do the internal reflection to self-actualize for ourselves, for our personal growth, to be our best person, to show up in places where other people don't, so that when we interact with other people, we are earning their trust, we are earning their respect, and that in itself is leadership. Leadership is not a title or some form of authority over someone else. It's actually earning the trust, because leadership is about relationships. It's about a human endeavor. So I think you're seeing these things connect through your writing your leadership philosophy, beginning to understand where you fit on the leadership spectrums. And then last week, writing your vision statements, really thinking about what it is that you have to offer the world, what is unique to you, and how you want to put that to practice in a specific way for a specific outcome. I think that's very important. I think a lot of you are understanding how leadership fits in every aspect of your life, everything from your familial relationships to group assignments to your, whether you have a part-time or a full-time job at the moment, in addition to yourself as a future professional person, right? Even in your romantic relationships, you have to have leadership to show up and to push that relationship to be the best it can be in a positive way for positive change, right? So all of these things matter, particularly last week when we're learning about building a constructive climate or creating community within a group. This is a difficult task. Everything about leadership is difficult because, again, it's a human endeavor. So circumstances are changing, goals are changing, people's moods are changing, and leaders have a responsibility to adapt and be flexible to all of those things, and give people, the situation, the task, the goal, everything that it needs to be successful. So we are going to transition to talking about Chapter 9, which is embracing diversity and inclusion. And as we do that, I want to stop and recognize that when I say the word diversity, inclusion, or even equity, which this chapter covers, for some reason, right now in the hot political climate we live in, these topics can be controversial for some reason. I don't really understand why. I think as human beings, particularly in the United States of America, we have founding principles that honor diversity. And so this whole chapter is about recognizing the differences that lie between us as people, and valuing those differences, particularly from a leadership perspective, what we can do to honor those differences, bring out those differences, and what those differences can do to our groups in ways like transformation, in ways like innovation. Okay, so that's what we're talking about in this chapter. First, let's talk about three key words involved in this chapter. Number one, diversity. I think for a very long time, when we said the word diversity in this country, I think most people thought about race. When we said diversity within a room, people thought different colors of people in a room. That is a very limited view of diversity, and as leaders, we need to understand that diversity is much more than that. Diversity is difference of any kind. So I'm just going to list for you some differences. Of course, race, right? But you have to understand that within a race, for example, I'm a Hispanic American, right? But my cultural background can be very different based on, did I grow up in a two-parent household? What was my family socioeconomic income level? Did I grow up in a rural setting, or did I grow up in an urban setting? There are a lot of differences that all of us experience. And again, this is just a very small snippet of what our differences can be. So when we think of difference, we want to be thinking of everything from sexual orientation to, again, socioeconomic background, an able-bodied person versus someone who has physical disabilities, a neurotypical person versus someone who has some neurological differences, like maybe someone's on the autism spectrum, or they have some type of mental illness, right? Diversity exists across a spectrum. And as you go through this learning module this week, you will start to understand when I say difference, differences can be on the surface, but differences can be under the surface as well. And just like it's our leaders' responsibility to recognize and value strengths, right? Within the people that we work with and in ourselves, we also have to value our differences. And we'll talk about why soon. Another topic that we're going to discuss is inclusion. Inclusion is the ability for a leader to basically include differences, right? That we are incorporating all of our differences into the experience of being together, in the experience of the group and the organization. Okay, inclusion, to include. Okay, and the next word, which is super important, is the word equity. Now, this is very different from equality, and let's talk about why. Equality means that we're offering everyone the same opportunities, which sounds good on the surface, of course, right? We want to give everyone the same opportunities. But sometimes, just like I said, when we value and see people's differences, we recognize that those differences mean that we may need to give certain resources and opportunities to different people for different reasons. Okay, so when we say equality and we offer those people the same thing, okay, some people may not need those opportunities because they already have them. And some people need more opportunities because they have less access to those same opportunities. Okay, and there's a really good illustration in your Canvas learning module this week that illustrates, I think, the difference between equality and equity, because equity is not giving everyone the same thing. Equity is actually taking a look at what people need based on their differences and giving it to them. So therefore, we are bringing in words like justice, okay? Because if we look at all of these people and assess what it is that they need to be able to start at the same level playing field, then we are offering equity to people. Okay, and like I said, there's a great graphic that shows, 3 different people trying to look over a fence and watch a baseball game or something, and they're all offered the same little box to stand on. And I'm 5 feet tall, and if that box is not going to help me, but it's going to help the guy next to me who's 6 feet tall, but we get the same box, that's equality because we got the same things, but it's not equity because I can't still see that baseball game. Okay, so I think that's a very effective way to look at it. So check out the graphic that has some similar type metaphors to what I just explained to you to give you a better difference and understanding of what the difference is between equality, which gives everyone the same thing and may not address their differences, and equity, which addresses their differences and offers opportunity and access. Okay, next the chapter will go into the history and the study of diversity, because it has been a study, especially since we live, again, like I said, in a country that our ideals are focused on, an immigrant sort of experience here in the United States. It started with the study of multiculturalism, which you may have heard that as a buzzword before 20 years ago. And then the teaching of tolerance, right? And I want you to think about that word. When this country started studying multiculturalism, there was a big teach tolerance sort of educational campaign. When I was coming through graduate school, it was all about teaching tolerance. And I want to ask you, do you and your family and your people want to just be tolerated? Right? When you say teaching tolerance and teaching difference, I don't want to be just tolerated. I don't know about you. I want to be valued and respected, right? So we have moved since then, thank goodness, right? That was a couple decades ago. We have moved past that. And we're also thinking about how to experience America differently. For example, for a long time, the metaphor of America, since we were so many immigrants in one country, was the melting pot. If you think about that metaphor, it means that everybody comes here and we all melt into one thing, right? We're all in this big old stew called the United States. And that metaphor has been updated for people to start thinking, instead of a melting pot where we all get in together and we all kind of become the same thing, rather a salad bowl, right? If we experience and value difference, then we understand that that difference is what makes us special. So if we have a salad bowl rather than a melting pot, then we all get to retain our cultural identities, right? But still exist together, right? We still make a beautiful thing together, and our togetherness and our individuality all mixed up in one is what makes us special. I think that's a really important metaphor for leaders to keep in mind, right? That when we come in and we are bringing what's special about us to a situation, to a task, to an experience, it makes it and elevates it all the more, okay? All right, the next thing the book is going to talk about is how to make the emphasis on diversity and inclusion and equity practical in your groups and in your organizations. And so they list 6 things. And first is safety, right? That people within your group, in order to really feel safe with their differences, right? If somebody shows up and has, let's say they're Muslim and they wear a headscarf, are they really feeling safe within your group? Right? And you won't really know that because it's not something they're going to say, correct? But it might be something that gets talked about if that person feels safe enough at some point. So the first step is safety. And this goes back to last chapter, right? Creating a constructive climate, creating community. People first have to feel safe for anything to get done and get done well. So that's important. And again, it reflects back on one of my favorite and most important chapters. We have to start with creating community, feeling safe. Number 2, involved and engaged. These people who are different may have been marginalized in the past. They may be reluctant to contribute, and so you have to make them feel safe in order for them to then move to stage 2, which is involved and engaged. Stage 3 is then they have been involved and engaged, and now they feel respected and valued. They feel to the next stage, number 4, influential, like they have some influence in the group, right? I feel respected and valued, and now I feel like my group actually will listen to me. I have influence here. And next is authentic and whole, that they can show up as their whole selves, right? That they can show up and have an accent and not feel that someone is going to make a snide comment about how they mispronounce a word, right? This is an important thing to understand, that all of these different ways in which we show up as our truest selves, that they're honored and valued so people can feel authentic and whole. And finally, number 6, that we are attending to the diversity itself, that we acknowledge that it's there, and when conflicts show up because of it, because we are different, there will be conflicts, and we're honoring those things, that we have an opportunity to discuss them, to address them, and to make the most of that moment, because it is an opportunity for understanding one another better, right? Conflict is just an opportunity for us to understand one another better. So in order for us to get to all those things, we first have to do that inward looking thing, which is like, oh, well, I'm a person who values all people. Of course I am. We also have to acknowledge the truth of it is, as human beings, we have, all of us, some implicit or unconscious biases, meaning some ways in which we look at things, and we have biases that have been those foundations have been laid as we were children and when we were growing up, that we don't even know exist. Okay. We have to deal with those unconscious or implicit biases by acknowledging them. You will find a link if you would like to explore it for the Harvard Implicit Bias Test that goes through a multitude of different topics and areas where you can just test yourself and see where your biases lie with those certain things like religion, race, gender, sexual orientation, right? Where how strongly do you respond to those things on an unconscious level in a way that may be hindering you and your leadership? Okay. Other things that are barriers are stereotypes. Be careful. All of us have been exposed to stereotypes, and just so that we're clear about this, there is no such thing as a good stereotype. People say, like, all Black people can dance. Not true, right? Okay, we all, and what happens is, when I say not all stereotypes are good, another one I can give you is, there's a quote unquote a good stereotype of all Asian people are smart in math. Think about a child in the 4th grade who happens to be Asian American, and kids around him make a comment when he does not do well on a test. That poor child is experiencing that result, that consequence of that stereotype. And it is no longer a positive, quote unquote, or good stereotype when it puts that child in a box and then makes him feel or her less important or criticized because of it, right? There's no such thing as a good stereotype, because those stereotypes are limiting. Anything that is limiting, right, whether it's good or bad, and usually most stereotypes are bad, but I'm trying to highlight some of the quote-unquote good ones because they're limiting. Anytime we put people in a box based on some external factor or cultural factor, this is not a good idea. We never want to put people in a box. We want people to be valued for who they are. We want to watch our prejudices. Of course, that's not a surprise. The book will also discuss privilege, another hot button, although I don't understand why. I think if we're thinking people, we can understand that in societies, certain things are valued higher than others. And so we have certain advantages. Those advantages are called privilege, right? My father grew up in a time in America when to be an immigrant person with a foreign-sounding name meant that he felt like he would not be able to get through certain hiring processes because of his very unusual sounding name, that even people beginning to pronounce it would be a problem, and he felt like his resume with his birth name on it would hinder him from even getting interviews. And so my father felt the need to change his name. Things have changed since then, but we still understand that basic concept, right? That certain things can limit us based on, again, our differences, culturally, racially, religion, etc. And so we have to understand what advantages I may have, right, versus someone else, because we all have certain privileges, right? There's that system. We all have certain privileges over other people. And I think our only responsibility then is to acknowledge that advantage and to then try to help people who maybe don't have that same access or that same resource or those same opportunities. And that is how things get better. Okay. So how do we wrap this up? We understand that leaders must value diversity. And how do we do that? We must first understand diversity. Diversity is just difference of every kind. Like I said, it is not race. It is every difference. It is religious difference. It is gender difference. It is every kind of difference that you can think of, that we are honoring and valuing them. That we seek to have full and true inclusion, right? If we notice that people are separated or not contributing, that we are seeking to include them and include all of their difference. We're not saying, I do not see your color, or I do not see your gender identity. No, we want to see you as a whole person. So therefore, we must get to a place where we can have honest conversations about those things, so that I do not unintentionally offend you, right? So that I can see you as a whole person and understand your experience, not ignore your experience that is different than mine. I hope y'all understand that. Finally, that we demand equity for all, right? As leaders, we have to acknowledge that some people have different opportunities than others, that privilege piece, right? And that society is not equal. And so we have a job to do as educators, as leaders, right? To make sure that we acknowledge that difference and we seek equity for all, that we seek the access to opportunities and access to resources for everyone based upon their need. Okay. And why do we do this? As leaders, we got to understand that our ultimate goal should be to be ethical, moral leaders, right? Positive change is what we're seeking. So we have to understand that diversity is beautiful. Diversity is what brings us together, and diversity is also what sets us apart, right? And those things are beautiful and important. And so ethically and morally, we have a responsibility to honor it. Personally, we have a responsibility to honor it, right? Okay, it starts right here. We have to set that norm for our group. Remember, our group norms and values must be set by the leader, and we understand that we are going to value and honor diversity. And finally, aside from just promoting those things within the group and the community itself, right, society-wide, we also have to understand that diversity is the foundation to innovation. And this is why, and I want to make sure you understand this. Yes, it's ethical and moral, but also leaders must understand that the more diversity of experience that we have in our groups, the bigger the diversity of solutions, the bigger the diversity of ideation, the bigger the diversity of innovation. Does that make sense? If we have all the same people from all the same places with all the same experiences, they're going to attack a problem with a lot of the same focus, intention, and problem-solving skills. If we have a lot of people with a lot of different experiences, with a lot of different strengths and understandings of the world, then we are going to attack a problem with a lot of different ideas, a lot of different ways to see the perspectives, a lot of different ways to come out on the other side with lots of innovative notions of what we could do here. So innovation is the foundation, right? We need to get to the innovation. We need the diversity. Okay, this is a great chapter. I hope you really dig into it and think about it. Good stuff here, everybody. Leaders need to know these things. Leaders need to honor these things. I'm here if you need me.